So hi guys, welcome to the MMA UK BJJ show. So Stoomboy as always. Now before we jump into our guest today, again just to let you know about the competition that we've got on at the moment. So our good friends at Raven Fightwear kindly donated a prize for us to put up for obviously all our viewers and so on. So it's a ranked rash guard and shorts, so matching ranked rash guard and shorts. If you've never been on the Raven website, have a look. There's some awesome stuff on there. So I think they do like medieval stuff and loads of different designs. So definitely go on and have a look. So that's on obviously my Facebook and the MMA UK BJJ show Facebook as well. So definitely get on, have a look. I'd say it's free to enter. So obviously once we get back to training, you'll be able to go back to training looking smart in a new rash guard and shorts. So yeah, check out Raven Fightwear on whether it be Facebook or the Raven Fightwear website as well. So today, joined by special guest Dominic Dillon. Dominic Dillon. Anybody that knows Dominic's a black belt under Yusuf Nabi. Dominic has masses of martial arts experience, as we're going to hear. So as I say, started off traditional Jiu-Jitsu before moving into Jiu-Jitsu. Obviously did some MMA as well. Quite successful in that as well. So we'll obviously hear about that. And catch wrestling, very successful in catch wrestling as well. So definitely looking forward to hearing about some of that as well. So Dominic, absolute honour to have you on. How are you doing today, bro?
I'm good, thanks. Yeah, no, really a lot of thanks for having me on. Enjoy the opportunity. Yeah, no, pretty good. Just been a sort of average Sunday here, kids and training.
Nice. So obviously taking us into the first thing then, obviously the lockdown. I mean, lockdown obviously it's hit everybody, every single person across all the martial arts. So it's not just specific to Jiu-Jitsu. I mean, it's MMA it's had an effect on, and any other martial arts. I mean, we've seen, unfortunately, gyms going out of business. We've seen, people have not been able to train in 8 months properly, which is horrible. I mean, how's it affected you, Dom?
Yeah, no, I mean it's been a massive blow because obviously like the main thing I do as a job is teach. So obviously that's basically been out the window. Fortunately, to the point where I was this year, the only shows that were available were like pro shows. So I have been able to compete on those, which I know a lot of people haven't been able to scratch that comp bug, and that's also helped me a bit financially as well.
Definitely.
But yeah, it's been a massive blow. Like one of the biggest constants of my life, or I don't know how long, to be honest. Probably since, well, in some form, training's been in my life since 4 years old. So not being having that like dojo feel daily has been a massive upheaval just alone.
Yeah, definitely. And how was your training? I mean, I know that you were on the show. You were on the show recently. You did the, I think it was a 4-man event. So I mean, how was your training for that? Did you manage to get? Well, I'm presuming you got some kind of training in, but I mean, what kind of training were you doing specifically?
Yeah, I mean, basically because I think I've competed on 3 events this year, 2 Polaris ones, and then I think the submission series that you mentioned. So my training, obviously, it's been happening, but it's been on a much like reduced scale because really, I think the first ones they started letting back were basically professionals. So that kind of, in a sense, it allowed, like for my point of view, selfishly, like quality people to be able to train with, because to fit into that criteria, you needed to be able to basically be getting a percentage of your living from competing. So mostly MMA guys, which from a no-gi perspective, that's sort of perfect. They're all the ones that I was sort of training with anyway. But yeah, it basically reduced my training partners from 20, 30, 40 people down to like 3.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely been tough. I know that for me, especially. I mean, I've not trained at all in 8 months since March. So that'll be 9 months now. And I'd say it's always good. I mean, when you go to the gym, I mean, it's probably the same for obviously your gym or any other gym that you train at, where you go in and there's that banter. You're able to go in and you're able to have a laugh and a joke with everybody. And I mean, is that something that you miss?
Totally. That's a massive thing. Like often on days where I wasn't even training, or if I was injured, I'd still come in just to be in that environment around those people. So no, that was like I'd say almost that's the biggest point of it. That's what makes you keep coming back through the injuries, the pain, the losses. That's what. Yeah.
They do. I mean, it's funny. I mean, as I said, we've got one of my good friends. Well, not just one, but as I say, we slag each other off rotten. I mean, we tell each other we're going to do this, we're going to do that, and even when you're rolling, you're whispering in their ear, and you're giving them kisses on the cheek and things like that, telling them what you're going to do to them, just for absolute banter. So it's a hilarious thing, martial arts in general. So you wouldn't get that in football. You wouldn't get that in any other sport apart from martial arts. So
I think so. No, I mean, literally the only sports I've ever done properly, apart from a very misguided workplace 5-a-side, is only martial arts. So yeah, but that's sort of my only experience with sports. But yeah, I do feel it's very unique.
Yeah, definitely. And then, so where did it all begin for you then? So you mentioned obviously you started training as early as 4-year-old.
Yeah, so technically I've been in the martial arts for let me get this right, 28 years at the minute. Because I started 4 years old because my father used to teach, well, he still does teach actually. He teaches Aikido, and there's we basically no longer speak about martial arts when that's the rule. But so I started in that when I was 4 years old, I think. I mean, apparently even before that, he used to hold me when he'd teach the class. So I was on the mat from I don't know what age, to be honest, in some form, like crawling. But yeah, from 4 years old was my first like proper class participation with a little gi.
Yeah. Nice. So would that have been? So did you start off Aikido, or was it the Japanese Jiu-Jitsu you started off then?
Initially, it was Aikido, but like Aikido kind of they trace their roots sort of through Daito-ryu, Aikido, Jiu-Jitsu, and then into like Japanese Jiu-Jitsu and stuff. And my dad would always go on about kind of like whenever they were teaching techniques, he'd always be like, oh, in the samurai jiu-jitsu, like that this would be a neck break or blah 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 blah. And so from an early stage there, I had like the idea that like jiu-jitsu was like this kind of super dangerous, more sort of violent form of what I was doing at the time. And also there would be occasional like guys who were Japanese jiu-jitsu green belts or black belts or something that were then training with my dad in Aikido. So I think that's the first that I started hearing kind of about jiu-jitsu in some form, while doing Aikido.
Definitely. And then how long did you, because I know it was you got into Jiu-Jitsu, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu quite late, well later. Obviously you didn't start off as early as some kids that start off. I think you were about what, 23, 24-year-old?
Yeah, no, I was. So I did. I mean, I did Aikido for 14 years. So I did that a long time. I did it like properly probably for about 4 or 5 years when I started having like questions, and then I started doing like some other things like some karate and some Japanese jiu-jitsu and things like that, and incorporate. I remember me and my brother used to be like, as kids are, we were always fighting, especially brothers. So it wasn't too long till we started trying to instigate kind of sparring in my dad's Aikido class. Which to be honest, we were probably nightmares for him. In fact, I know we were nightmares for him because we were constantly basically just trying to like, oh well, this doesn't look like it really works if I try and do this and that, and basically end up rolling around in a pile on the floor. So that started being a theme more and more as me and my brother got up like the grades with my father. And I think when we became black belts and started teaching a bit, our classes basically were a combination of things we'd learned from the other dojos we were training at, like with a bit of Japanese jiu-jitsu and karate or whatever, and then things we'd read in like books or something, like old judo books. Or I remember like there were a lot of things that were bridging from like the traditional kind of martial arts to sort of actual like freestyle type competition. And I remember one of the books that was bridging for me was Small Circle Jiu-Jitsu by Wally J, where he was like a legit judo guy, but then he also got into all this like small circle stuff, you know, holding person down with one finger type thing. And but at the same time, then there were things like a juju katami, like a straight arm lock and a hip throw and things in the book. So there was like a mixture of things that were like legit combat sports, and then kind of a bit of the art sort of. And because I was coming from Aikido, which, you know, my dad used to do the no touch throwing people across the room and things. I used to be a hooky for it. It's a really weird environment to get sucked into, where you're kind of throwing yourself, but somehow like it's a really weird like environment to be in, and you're almost trying to upstage the other Ukis by throwing yourself more than the other guys are throwing and things. So you'll be like picked as Uki more often and things. It's surreal. But yeah, that was one of the first times for me where I started seeing this like slight because it was a book which had a bit of both, and then I started seeing this other stuff, and this other stuff I kind of liked. And when I'd wrestle with my brother, this other stuff was kind of what I would more do. Like it's like, oh, these kind of like wrist locks, and you know, we've never knocked each other over with out touching each other. So so I'm kind of finding that, you know, like sort of fairly badly done hip throws read from a book were actually kind of working and things. That's sort of where I started making that diversion. And then I found some jiu-jitsu schools, some Japanese jiu-jitsu schools, which again were taught by judo black belts as well. And obviously, while it still had some of the like you catch a knife thrust and you disarm the knife, or you block the sword thing and stuff, they also had like some like legit knee waza. And there seemed to be, again, this big gap between like what we were doing when someone was like, you know, when we were doing these staged like knife defenses, and then when they were saying like, okay, now we do shiai or randori. And it was like, oh, why aren't we doing that? Like, why doesn't that work when I'm doing this? But yeah, so they were teaching like, again, a split of things that were like basically judo and kind of the catch a knife, twist it out of their hand type stuff that I've been learning with my dad.
Yeah, definitely. And it's funny you say that about your brother. I mean, I remember I was talking to Ashley Williams the other day, and Ash was talking about him and his brother Josh, and they used to go to competitions, and they would always end up meeting each other in the final or in some round in the competition. And what I thought, what I found was brilliant was they two used to fight each other in competitions. And you always get that thing where some gyms where teammates won't fight teammates and things like that. Where here you go, you've got two brothers who are quite happy to go in and basically kick a shit out of each other in a competition. So obviously your brother, again, doing kind of something similar, obviously rolling about the mats and things like that. So is your brother does he still train? Does he still train with you?
Yeah, I mean, we don't get to train together as much because I live in Brighton now and he still lives in Norfolk. But yeah, he just got his brown belt. He trains at Carlson Gracie Thetford under Lee Dosky he didn't just get his brown belt. Sorry, he got his brown belt last December. It feels like just because like all of this.
Well, the last year we've done nothing. So.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a write-off. It's like, but yeah, no, he got his brown belt last December and he managed to squeeze in. He did the Euros in January. He thinks he actually got COVID at that comp as well because he was really sick. But yeah, he managed to he won his first match and then lost his second at Brown, as his first comp at the Euros in Brown.
Yeah, definitely. And then got a couple of questions coming in. Obviously, Peter Knox, ever fancy MMA? Well, Dominic has done obviously some MMA, so again we'll touch on that. Obviously, quite successful as well. So we'll touch on that just shortly. Chris Hayes, Koala Jiu-Jitsu. So this was the thing I was going to touch on, was the obviously the nickname Koala. Again, how did the nickname come about then?
In a sense, I can kind of touch on both questions then, because I actually was from an MMA fight. I think it was my third amateur fight, I think it was. It was bizarre rules. It was ref by like Ian Freeman, and it was like semi-pro at the time. A lot like because it was such a Wild West then. What was it? It was 4-ounce gloves, and no ground and pound on the floor or something. And the guy I was fighting is like, what? And Ian Freeman calls it, because we were the main event on the show, because it didn't have any pro ones. And he calls us over and he's like, okay, well, what rules do you want to have? And he's like, well, I want to be able to do ground and pound. I was like, sure, if I can heel hook.
Yeah.
So he's like, yeah, okay, fine, all subs and ground and pound. So yeah, we're in the fight, and in the third round, I think I get fireman carried. I somehow manage in on a leg into like 50-50 and sweep into a heel hook attempt.
Yeah.
And basically, while I'm doing it, the guy's like holding on my hand and like hammer fisting me in the head. And I keep trying to separate his legs to get like this heel hook. And the commentator is like, oh my God, like he's holding onto the leg of, so tight or something. He's holding onto his leg like a koala.
Right.
And obviously, like everyone at the gym afterwards was just like, you know, like sort of teasing me about it and stuff. And it just kind of stuck. And I didn't mind it. I quite liked it. I always like kind of, I don't know, I was quite tongue-in-cheek. Like I like kind of tongue-in-cheek nicknames. I was never like, I don't know, I didn't think I'd ever pull off something like, you know, something more aggressive.
Dominic the Nightmare Dillon.
yeah, those kind of things. Like I don't know. I wasn't able to ever hear them with a straight face. But koala, I quite liked. I actually have a tattoo of a koala now on my leg. But yeah, it basically came from that, and the guys like kept using it, and then eventually, it would be thrown around as like, oh, Koala Jiu-Jitsu and stuff. And I think one of the places I was teaching at a little while, we called the Koala Dungeon.
Right. Okay.
So that was like it was just like a no electricity place, which we used like the red light heaters as the only light, and it was like a really thick carpet that we rolled on. But that was Koala Dungeon.
Koala Dungeon.
That's where it came from.
Nice. Some of the best names are names like that, as I said, nicknames that have come up during fights and things like that you hear. So definitely some of the best nicknames. But it's good it's kind of stuck with you. I mean, we have, I don't know if you know Giles Garcia, based in Glasgow. So Ronin Grappling. Giles is, I call Giles the backpack. So very, very similar to Koala, because once he gets your back, he holds on and he's tucked right into you, and you try to get him off. And obviously, I'm bigger than him, so I stand up with him and I'm trying to shake him off. And nah, man, he's going nowhere, absolutely nowhere at all. So next thing I'm doing, I'm tapping because he's choked me out. So, but no, definitely a great nickname, the Koala. So, so obviously with your MMA stuff, I mean, how did that come about then? Because obviously coming from like a traditional Japanese Jiu-Jitsu, Aikido background to then go into MMA is obviously a kind of big step.
Yeah, I mean, originally, like I was getting kind of away from the extremely like soft style martial arts that I started in, and looking for like more heavy contact ones that get into like a full contact karate and a few things, as well as the Japanese jiu-jitsu. And originally my main focus was self-defense, and I think eventually I ended up in Krav Maga as well, teaching Krav Maga and Japanese jiu-jitsu. And at the time I was teaching like self-defense to like security and doormen mostly, as well as like just general classes. And that was kind of the idea. And then my brother started at an MMA gym, which they just had a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt come over from the States. So he started down there. And I think he had a fight in 2012, an amateur fight. And I was this point kind of still teaching with a self-defense point of view, but I was kind of also enjoying like the kickboxing sparring. And obviously when my brother had his fight and stuff, had been sparring with him and wrestling with him and stuff, just like, so I thought I'd have a fight as well. At the time, I wasn't going to my brother's at the gym. My brother was going to or anything, and the coach from my brother's gym, Stuart Chase, ran an MMA show. So that's the show my brother fought on. But because I wasn't anything to that with gym, I was like, oh, I'll leave my brother doing that thing. I'm going to fight on, there was some other show, Contenders, starting up in Norwich. So I'll put in my name to fight on that show. I mean, I had no clue, literally. I was weighing myself on dial scale. So I thought, okay, I'll step on the scale, see what weight I am. Oh, 76. Okay. So I'll put down 76. Obviously on the day, I was actually 70 kilos on digital scales, not 76. But yeah, so that was basically, I signed up for that fight just thinking along the lines. I've been reading a lot of stuff about with Nick Hughes and Gavin Mulholland, and they were again from traditional backgrounds, and they got into MMA. through the idea that basically it's the closest proving ground you can get. And like, I was very big into the thing of like, it's kind of irresponsible, because I've seen through all the like soft martial arts and stuff, how the amount of confidence people had that they could stop a knife thrust or 7 attackers getting them at once because of this stuff. And obviously when you start getting into combat sports, it's hard enough to deal with one guy. And who's unarmed. So I was like, I thought it was a very, like, I thought it was quite unethical to be teaching stuff that you weren't confident in that worked. Like, I thought it was quite unethical. So I figured the best, like, it would be kind of my responsibility to test it in some form. So this MMA show seemed to be that. So kind of with like my karate, kickboxing, kind of the jiu-jitsu groundwork and stuff I'd been doing, I thought, okay, I'll put in for that. And my brother was that came to corner me. And when I showed up, my opponent actually didn't come. He'd burnt his hand on a barbecue. So instead, on, I think it was 6 hours notice, so I'd weighed in 6 kilos lighter than I put in my name. And then on 6 hours notice, they were like, okay, well, we've got this other guy who his opponent hasn't turned up either. He's like, do you guys want to fight? I was like, okay, sure. He's like, but it's not an MMA fight now. It's a K1 fight.
Right,
I was like,
right.
Okay, so we didn't have any of the shit with us. Well, we'd come with like 7-ounce amateur gloves. We didn't have any of the shit. So we're basically from various people. I think I think the Meeks brothers were 2 of them in that, and Sean Byrne was in our corner room as well. As when I met him, and we're basically just like begging and borrowing like shin guards and 10-ounce boxing gloves off these guys. Like, to be honest, I'm so stressed getting ready for this thing. I'm not even stressed about the fight. I'm just panicking about that we're going to get the kit.
Yeah.
So we finally get it together. The cut man, who he's actually Adam Gigley, he's now in the UFC. He's a cut man for the UFC, but he was doing this show. Anyway, he's also wrapping everyone's hands. So he's come back and he's wrapping my hands. He's like, oh, I don't have time to finish. I've got to get back in the cage for the next fight. I'm like, I'm the next fight. So I end up doing it with just my right hand wrapped. So anyway, I walk out, and by the walkout, I'm actually like, oh, it's such a relief, because it's been so stressful getting all the stuff together and stuff. So anyway, I go out for the fight, and I end up, I fight this guy. It's the worst fight I've like, it's so bad technique. It was basically a barroom brawl. We're swinging at each other. I think the only thing I've been doing over this like Sushin Gen fighting drills with my brother, which were like these clinched knees. So I ended up kneeing this guy in the head probably like 17 times over the fight. My knees had bruised the next day. He was bleeding so much, like my brother was wiping blood off me between the rounds, but I couldn't knock him out. It's so tough. He was like, his nickname was Mad Dog. So it's just like, we were just like hands at the hips swinging at each other. Anyway, so I won a unanimous decision, and yeah, that was like my first fight.
That's mad. I mean, you hear about things like that, obviously, from the early days in MMA and things like that, where things like that have happened, do you know what I mean? But for it to happen to you and be in that situation must have been absolutely mad.
Yeah, no, it was quite an experience. It was it was fun. It was also like the biggest part was because basically, like, I was even going to come out in my like Japanese jiu-jitsu jacket and like my Japanese jiu-jitsu black belt and stuff, and like basically, like, at the time I considered myself like a decent grappler. Like, it was judo style grappling, but it was like okay. Like I like, you know, sort of submit most of the guys I trained with and stuff. So the plan was literally like to get this guy to the floor. And then when I come back and it's like, oh, I'm doing a K1 fight, my brother just looks at me and goes, fuck. It's like, so yeah, it's a bit of a different thing. But, yeah,
definitely. And then Peter Knox as well, Ian Freeman, legend. Obviously you mentioned Ian Freeman, so definitely an MMA legend. Peter's also saying, Stoomboy, you've got no mates. Now the reason Peter's saying that, Dominic, is Peter's been getting it tight. We're all in an MMA UK group page, and there was one of the fights last night. I think it was the Paul Hughes and the Jordan fight on Cage Warriors. Was it not last night? No, it was last night. So, but there was, on the group chat, we were split down the middle when it came to who had actually won the fight, because it was a very close fight. Some of us felt it was Paul Hughes had won it. Some of us felt Jordan had won it. So we got into a bit of a debate about the scoring of rounds. And Peter said, look, you can't have a 10-10 round. So you can't have a draw. You can have a 9-9 because obviously you could win around 10-9 and get deducted a point, but you can't have a 10-10. So everybody jumped on Peter. So Peter's been getting it tight since yesterday. And he's been doing well, man. He's been fighting his corner. He's been doing really well. So yeah, he's a bit upset. So
who did you have winning the fight?
Mate, I thought Paul Hughes. I'd say it was very, very close. It was very close. But then because obviously on the MMA UK news, the group chat, everybody was saying, look, we felt it was Jordan. This is the reason why. People were saying, obviously, felt it was Paul. This is the reason why. So it was kind of good. It was good, completely split down the middle. So
yeah, I came in watching it live on the third round, so I then went back afterwards to watch the first 2 rounds. But yeah, I mean, Jordan Vasenik is like someone that I've known. God, I think the first time I met him was he'd only been training like 2 months at the time. He was such a like humble kid. It's amazing to watch him grow. Yeah, like I think I was there at his first grappling comp, and he'd shown up like by himself because I kind of knew his team and stuff. I think he'd come down by himself and was waiting for like one of them to come and corner him or something. But yeah, he's such a talent. It's been amazing to watch his rise.
It definitely is. I mean, obviously he got the win. He did get the win, so that'll take him on to bigger and better things. He did a live call with Katie Hunter just a couple of weeks ago, man, and he's an absolute character of a boy. I mean, see the things he was saying, and just the way he was talking, and he was like, "I'm the best, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do that." Absolutely brilliant character. Perfect personality for a mixed martial arts. He came out last night, and obviously, don't get me wrong, he did well. He did really well. I just felt that Hughes maybe edged it. There was a bit in the first round. I mean, if you came in the third round, you would have missed the kind of controversy in the first round. There was Jordan was taking Paul down, and he grabbed the fence, and as soon as he grabbed the fence, he ended up on top of Jordan, right? So, but had he not grabbed the fence, then Jordan potentially would have ended up on top, and the round would have been scored differently. So obviously there was the ref didn't do anything. He didn't give any kind of warnings or anything like that. So that was a bit of controversy. So, but yeah, I mean, I just felt for Paul. Paul probably edged it just ever so slightly. So
it was super close. It was super close, definitely.
Definitely. So that's why Peter's a bit upset, because obviously we've been given a bit tight since yesterday. So so coming back to you then, so obviously the MMA, so you got your first fight out the way, and where did you go from there then?
Then I started going down Iceni a little bit to train with Colin Burton, who he to be honest, he has a major impact on both me and my brother's development. And been on and off our coach for years back then. But this was like my first time properly going down to train under him. And to be honest, he basically showed me in no uncertain terms that my stand-up was shit. And he was, I seem to remember him just standing in front of me going like, hit me. And every time he was like, he'd just move it and jab me. He's like, you're just over telegraphing. Basically, I had my elbows out. It was all just, but but he's a great guy. And then he moved over to the gym my brother was training at, and I started going down there. And then their coach, Stuart Chase, who ran that gym, Kickstop, he offered me a fight, I think, on one of his shows, East Coast Fight Factory. So I was booked my first, this time MMA fight. Obviously, the last one was meant to be an MMA fight, but this was definitely going to be an MMA fight. And my brother was on it as well. So we were both fighting. We were actually fighting brothers as well. So we were fighting, I can't remember their names now, but they were 2 brothers from BKK, which is Jack Mason's gym. So we're 2 of those ones. And my brother went up first because he always liked to be on like early. So he had like, I think his 3rd fight or something. He armbarred the guy. And then I then had my fight after the break on the main card. And I remember I was absolutely terrified. I was so much scared in the first fight. Like in the video, you see like my eyes are just absolutely super wide, but it's like I was terrified. I was walking towards it and I was like thinking, going through my head, like what happens if I like climb out of the cage and run away? What happens? So anyway, I get into the cage, and then we start the fight. At the time, I was, again, because I was still coming from like pretty much Japanese jiu-jitsu, I just started going down this MMA gym a little bit. So most of my takedowns were very judo-esque. So leg grabs were not really something I was very good at the time. But I remember I got kicked a couple of times. I was like, that really hurt. So I ended up grabbing hold of this cage, kind of leg against cage. And I remember kind of fiddling out how, while I'm holding onto a single leg, that I kind of do a tai otoshi. So I kind of trip him off the thing and get him on the mat, and then basically manage to keep him down there. I think, and then later when he's up, another takedown I hit was like a body lock, and then just like a tani otoshi, which were both like kind of traditional judo takedowns, and I managed to win a unanimous decision on that. And then that was my second fight out of the way. But I think that was the fight probably I've been the most scared of out of any of them, because it was like I don't know, it was a lot.
Because that's something I noticed. I mean, when you were at SGI, you're very, very confident. You came out very confident and ready to go, always ready to go. Obviously, being SGI, being a grappling match, jiu-jitsu match, obviously it's slightly different from MMA, but you did come in with that confidence. You seen it. You were kind of going about before. Obviously, the fight had started, and then came out just completely confident. So, is that something that, obviously, just that fight, that was the one fight you were more nervous about, or is that something you've kind of built up that confidence over the years?
Yeah, it's a bit of both. I mean, I'd say like it was weird. That fight was probably the most scared I was in a fight for a long time. Like you always have the kind of nerves, but generally I wouldn't I used to fight very frequently after that in MMA, and I kind of got known for literally fighting kind of anyone on any notice, and generally being like a lot of people liked, which I quite like, because I always was a fan of Japanese MMA, would compare me to various like Japanese type ones in the fact that I seem to just like not sort of give a fuck about it. Sorry, not sure what language appropriate, but like that I would just get in there and fight and didn't seem to have any stress. And for a long time that was true, but it is something that you'd always have like the doubts and stuff built in, but you end up pushing them out and you get better at doing that. But definitely for several years in MMA, I didn't used to really show any kind of fear. I was just like super like excited to sort of get in there. To be honest, till when I was like kind of seen as often the underdog, I loved that. When I started getting to the point when I started getting ranked amateur and I was like ranked #1 and stuff, and people were expecting me to win and shit, then I used to get stressed. That would get stressed. I still try and present the same kind of aura that I'd been developing up to then, and that I'd kind of become known for, and that's how I was trying to see myself. But I seeing stress when people were like really confident that I was going to win. I'm like, oh fuck, like I'm not that confident I'm going to win.
Definitely. A lot of the time, I mean, as you probably know, I mean, a lot of the time you put the pressure on yourself. That's where the kind of nerves and the doubt comes in, because it's always yourself that puts the pressure on you. So, and you mentioned about ended up #1. I mean, you were #1, and was it UK or was it Europe wide?
It was UK. So I was #1 in 2 weight divisions. I was #1 at featherweight and I was #1 at lightweight. In amateur, well, semi pro, but now that's just all known as amateur. So amateur A class or whatever they went through so many different names. So that was a kind of a long time coming. Like for ages, I used to like alternate losses, wins, type that. But it would be then I started getting some streaks going, and I beat some quite good people who were ranked well, and then that like started putting me up there. But it was. But at first, I'd literally fight anyone. I fought like you know Mike Grundy. In the UFC. So I fought him on 2 days' notice as an amateur. I was meant to fight some kid from Carbon. I can't remember his name now, but they for some reason thought I was younger than I was. So like 3 days before the show, my coach Stuart Chase, he's like, yeah, he's like, oh yeah, the kids pulled out. They didn't realize you were over 18. Like, he's 17, so they were like done with the fight. I was like, okay. And then he calls me later that day. He's like, they've offered his coach though. I'm like, who's his coach? His coach is Mike Grundy. I was like, okay. So I Google him, and as soon as it comes up with like a, you know, Olympic highlights, I'm like, shit. Like, he was, I think he was ranked 14th in the world at that point in freestyle still.
Right.
So yeah, he's had like, I think 2 amateur fights at this point, won them both. So yeah, he's like, oh yeah, I'll give you 150 quid. If you fight him. It's like 2 days before the fight. I'm like, oh, no, I'm not going to fight him at first. He's like, okay. Then he comes back again. And he's like, you sure you're not going to fight him? He's like, you know, you've always got free training at the gym and stuff. You know, you sure you're not going to fight him? And so I call up Colin, who's like always been kind of technical coach and stuff and things. And he's like, well, you haven't got knockout power or a killer sub game off your back. It's like your basic chance to catch a guillotine when he shoots.
Yeah.
He's like, but great experience, and you know, yeah, you get free training at the gym and shit. So it's like, okay. Well, actually, I think I first back, I was like, okay, you got 200 quid, you've got a deal. He's like, nah, I can only do 150. I'm like, okay. So anyway, yeah, I thought that was to be honest, that one I definitely don't think I went in confident, because it's the only fight I've had where literally everyone was giving me condolences before the fight. Like, my training partner, Stuart Gooch, he was beforehand, he was like, if there's a lot of blood, do you want me to throw in the towel? His blood, of course. But, yeah. So yeah, it's like everyone was just like, oh dear. Yeah, so I went at that, and we go out. It's like he's got Paul Sass in his corner and stuff. And like he's super pacing. Like, I'm kind of now looking at this like, okay, well, it's an experience, but and he's like there staring me down, like pacing. I'm like, God, he's taking this really seriously. And yeah, the fight starts, and I try and double leg him.
Yeah.
Which actually was, I mean, because that's all I had at the time. I was a fairly decent wrestler, it turned out. So yeah, I tried to double leg him, which was lucky because he threw a head kick. So the head kick just missed me at the shoot this double. And I actually get him up off his feet for us as I'm running him towards the cage. And I'm actually like, oh God, I might actually take this guy down. And I remember like his feet like touch the floor slightly, and he reverses me in about, oh God, I don't know, like 12 inches of space before we hit the cage. He reverses me on. I'm like, oh, Jesus. Then I think I try a terrible like head wrap hip throw, and he suplexes me. And somehow I end up in guard. Like, I wasn't doing jiu-jitsu at this point, and or I just started. Maybe I just started. I don't know. And my back game, like I was an upturned turtle on my back. Like, it was horrific. So the fact I managed to get guard, I locked this guard out, and I was basically just grabbing hold of his hands, trying to avoid ground and pound.
Yeah.
And so we're there for a little bit, and I'm trying to like set this like omoplata, I think I tried, which again, like I don't think I'd subbed anyone in the gym off my back, let alone in competition at this point. And then I throw up a triangle, which like triangle still isn't my best submission, but God, this was probably the most horrific triangle you've ever seen. I tried to throw up, and he passes off it into a cradle, and then darces me off it. I remember the darts, like I tried to swim out and like come up, and he literally just picked me up off my feet with this dart. Yeah, so that was that done. But it was an experience. It was actually more recently, like right before the lockdown, one of the Polarises that got killed by the lockdown, I was on a match with him in a grappling match, which I was quite excited about, actually, because it would be interesting to see, like, since the years passed, however many it's been, like 7 or 8 years, it would have been quite interesting. And I've been in like I've been on the podium in a couple of grappling competitions with him, like when we've both lost to Ross Nichols. So I was like, I knew he grappled and stuff. So I was like, I was kind of quite interested in that. But maybe at some point that will be something that comes to fruition.
Definitely. Polaris will get it on. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So maybe an up and coming Polaris, definitely. So it'd be interesting to see. I mean, the difference in, as you mentioned, the difference in skill levels from back then to what they're like now. Because as I said, obviously since then, I mean, your grappling skill level is unbelievable.
Yeah, exactly. And obviously, like, because with his like contract with the UFC and stuff, grappling, while obviously he's still got that Olympic level and he's doing his submissions and everything, he's got like a lot of other stuff to focus on as well. But fighting world level people is always like, it's great. It's, you know.
Definitely. And then, so coming into jiu-jitsu then, so Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, as I say, started 23, 24. So what was your kind of first opinion on jiu-jitsu? Because I know when I speak to some people and they say that when they, well, it may be different from you because you'd done things before that, but a lot of people when I speak to, when they get their first taste of jiu-jitsu, I mean, especially if they're wearing a gi, a lot of no-gi guys won't ever wear a gi and vice versa. So what was your opinion on Brazilian jiu-jitsu?
Well, my brother had already been doing it for a little while, but because of the cost and stuff, I wasn't doing the sessions at the time. So he was doing them. I think he'd been training for maybe jiu-jitsu like a year and a half, 2 years. I think maybe 2 years. I just got his blue belt at the time. And the coach, the black belt coach, had actually moved away. So it was like the sessions were mostly run by Colin Burton, who was a purple belt at the time. And was he still blue? He might have still been a blue at this time. But he got his blue under like Mauricio Gomez like 10 years before that. So he was a very long serving blue at the time. But we were in the back end of Norfolk. There was like very rare black belt visitors there. But anyway, so I'd been doing some grappling, like when my brother obviously came to like our Japanese jiu-jitsu classes, that we'd taken off the gi and we were kind of more MMA at this point because I'd had like 2 whole fights. So I was doing that. And I kind of, you know, I got into a bit of sambo from some guys knocking around, and we were teaching out of a judo club, so we had the odd grappler kind of little input. So I thought, okay, like I knew kind of where I measured up with my brother. So I was like, you know, I'd actually been kind of thinking about going for quite a bit. My brother had always kind of been putting me off because it was like his thing a bit. But anyway, I got in the end, and I think I remember the first thing I did. In fact, I remember it was Chris May. We were rolling. He's a purple belt now, but we were rolling, and I heel hooked him and popped his foot with a heel hook in the gi. So obviously that was a big no, and which I was like, what? I thought that was a sub, and like, no, you can't do that. It's like, okay, actually. That was my second session. My very first session, I'd come down to meet my brother afterwards, and I was watching the class, and I was like in my jeans and t-shirt, and there's like 4 of them. It's like my brother and then 3 white belts, and they're rolling. Oh no, 2 white belts. That's it. They were uneven number, and Stuart Chase was kind of running the class, but he wasn't taking part. And I was like, oh, do you need an extra body? And he's like, okay. So I had a gi jacket on with my jeans and stuff. So I went on, and I felt quite good actually. I rolled with a couple of these white belt ones, and I was like getting scarf hold, shoulder locks and stuff. And I was like, this is okay, thing like that. So that was my first session. Then I rolled with my brother, and the same thing happened. Normal. I pushed around his guard, and then he armbarred me. So that was my actual first session.
So a gi top and a pair of jeans on.
Yes. Rolling. And I remember there was a really awkward moment where one of the guys asked me, because he was like, the guy, Stuart was like to this guy, he like was laughing. He's like, oh, it's okay. He's a Japanese Jiu-Jitsu black belt. And then the guy goes, what's the difference between Japanese Jiu-Jitsu and BJJ? And there's like this awkward silence. Stuart was very tactful. He's like, Google it. But so I was like, really, I should just be doing like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Then I started training down there with Colin and going to his classes.
Definitely. And Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I mean, it's definitely, I mean, certainly for you, I mean, anytime I've watched you, it suits you, your style and things like that, just kind of moving about and being able to free flow and things like that. So, and then how quickly was it before you then went from, let's say, white belt up to your blue belt?
So I got my blue belt. I started March 2013. I got my blue belt that December. Because when I was training, obviously, like Colin couldn't grade because he was a purple belt, and then Colin left for personal reasons, and my brother was then teaching the classes, so he's a blue belt. So I went to my first competition. I think it was the Essex Open 2013, and I think I had like 5 matches or something, and I won them. And then I was talking to Mark Nixon, who I knew slightly through MMA. Like they had some of their guys fight on the same show my coach ran that I fought on and stuff. And he's like, "Oh, we've got a black belt that trains. It comes down from London, Eduardo Goncalves. You should come up and train with us."
Yeah.
So eventually, I start going up there, and like it's like 2 train journeys all the way in Felixstowe that I had to go to, and I go up there. Mark used to make a joke actually. He was like, "I was there more often than people that lived in Felixstowe." But anyway, I'd be going up there a lot, and basically, it was kind of weird because technically, like, I wasn't a like real white belt in a sense. So it was like I was generally getting the better of most white belts, and like in competition, I think they had me do. I won the British and the English that year, and yeah, like I had extra stress because I felt I couldn't lose to a white belt. So I never lost to a white belt in competition. I think I had about 30 matches as a white belt. But then also it was kind of getting to the point where people were considering me sandbagging, even though it was like kind of within the first year of training. And there was all this kind of thing of, well, if it's Japanese jiu-jitsu, should like, what does Japanese, because obviously with judo black belts, it just kind of come in at that time that, oh, if you're a judo black belt, you can't compete so that people were kind of drawing comparisons and going, well, should he be fighting as a white belt? And I remember talking to Eduardo about it. And I think I came across as Eduardo as basically going, oh, I should be a blue belt. Can you give me my blue belt? I was literally just like, oh, like, I was like, should I feel bad for the white belt competition? But I think how it came across to him was like, you're like asking for your blue belt.
Yeah.
But anyway, so and then final one was like the English of the year. So I did the English, and I nearly didn't compete in it because like so many people were messaging me going like, "Oh, what belt are you competing at this in?" And you know, should you be competing at white belt? So I called them, and I was like, "Oh man, like you know, I was basically like, can I just do the blue belt category even though I'm a white belt?" And he's like, "No, you do white belt, you don't compete." And it's like, "Well, I want to compete." So I did it. I think I had 6 matches, like the white belt division. Then it was always like 40 guys or something. But so I won lightweight, and then I got my blue belt the week after that. So yeah, that was quite good. And then I was like, oh, that's a breath of, because I was starting to feel like getting really anxious, like because I was like, oh man, am I doing something wrong here? It's like, yeah. It was. I was even a subject of a BJJ Underground thread. It was
the good old underground. The good old underground. Yeah. So again, that's something I talked to Ashley Williams about, and Ashley was saying the same thing. So 1 minute, you could put a post up. It could be a genuine post where you could be asking about something, or where's there a gym in this area or whatever, and then you'll get. Some people come on and give you advice. Other people come on and just tear you to bits for no reason whatsoever. So
yeah,
it's not changed over the years. And we always tell new people, if you're going to be going on the underground, post at your own will. So expect somebody's going to give you some type of abuse. And as I said, it's definitely not changed over the years. So so the good old underground. The underground's funny for that. I mean, anybody that maybe a different belt level, as you said, whether it be a white belt or a blue belt or even black belts and things like that, I mean, they'll go on and just tear everybody to bits for no reason whatsoever. So, and then, so you obviously coming into your blue belt then, so I take it with the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, that kind of complemented, obviously, the MMA stuff you were doing then.
Yeah. I mean, I'm still very much a top game guy. Like, I think still when I got my blue belt, like, the specialty of like Eduardo and Mark Nixon there were kind of like half guard. So I was starting to get a stronger half guard, but still, I remember with the first time I actually played successfully in the gym, like with some of the higher belts off my back in half guard. I was like, oh, because it was pretty much like all my white belt comps were the same thing. It was like single leg, knee cut, single leg, knee cut. Like, and that was pretty much it. So yeah, it was still kind of developing out, and yeah, blue belt. I remember I kind of was my first half a year as a blue belt. Again, I was unbeaten. I won all the comps that I went in, and man, there was this little part of me. I was like, man, what if I never lose? My God, like I'm looking up like Marcelo Garcia's record online and stuff. I'm like, man, what if I find like 14 matches straight. Like, what if I never lose? And this was kind of, in a sense, it was actually balancing out, because this was like right around, I'd had a couple of rough fights. I think I'd lost 2 MMA fights in a row. Like, I just fought Mike Grundy and someone else or something. So I was, so this was kind of balancing out my ego for me. But that came crashing down at that year's English Open in the November, where I went in and I lost my first match, got submitted, and then I won 2 matches, and then lost my 4th match by submission as well. So I lost twice for the first time in one day, and I was kind of like, oh, okay. And then when so I don't think I won another medal at blue belt actually after that. I don't think I won another medal at blue belt after that. But yeah, so there was definitely like, I think there was a combination of the fact that I was competing at a high level and running into guys at blue that had obviously been blue a little while, but also I think there was definitely then the psychological blow as well, where I was suddenly like, oh shit, what I was doing not working. So that was my the smashing of my disillusion of being unbeaten in jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, no, I mean, I can feel that one with you. I mean, I went, and I think it was when I first started jiu-jitsu, my first 7 competitions, I'd won gold in, and I hadn't been beat in my division. I hadn't been beat at all the way through the UK. And then I remember my coach saying to me, "You should go to the World Masters," and I'm like, yeah, fuck it, why not? So I ended up booking everything, going to the World Masters and going over there, all the way over to California. Spent a week training over there, into Vegas, spent a week in Vegas, went up, competed, first fight, he came up against a judo black belt, very, very big, massive guy. He got his purple belt right after beating me, right after the World Masters. I'd only been a blue belt for about 6 months, and I thought, fuck it, yeah, let's do this. And then went over there, went to full fight, ended up getting beat 4-0. I got I think I was taken down, got a knee on Bailey, so it was about 4-0, and then just thinking, devastated, absolutely devastated. I remember being on the phone to my coach, like, fuck, I don't know what happened, and blah, blah, blah. I just seemed to go out and freeze, and then that was it. Fight was over. So I'd spent all that money going all the way over to Vegas, thinking, shit, I'm going to win this. I'm going to, this is. And then, didn't go well at all. So, so I can feel you in that one. As it took me a while mentally. I mean, I used to go into fights and be like, I'm fucking beating everybody. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And then that one loss destroyed me. Absolutely destroyed me. And they always say that jiu-jitsu, you win or you learn, but then when you lose, it's fucking it takes a lot of learning to get back up there.
It does, and you kind of have to rethink your whole mental programming of how you've been viewing yourself. I mean, that's like, it's the weird thing. Like, looking back now at myself, like, you know, whatever, my blue belt self, white belt self, thinking that I was going to remain, you know, I'm kind of like, I find it amusing that I thought that, but at the time I genuinely thought that, you know, I genuinely believed that. And it's it's amazing. It's the same, I guess, as you age, isn't it? Like, you look back at your young self, you know, thinking this, that, or whatever. You're like, oh dear, little eye roll to yourself. But
definitely. And then when did the move then over to Yusuf? So how did that come about for you?
Well, it was a little bit in between, really, because I always I kind of joked because, well, up to my black belt, I never got 2 belts off the same instructor, so I bounced around a little bit. So basically, I was blue belt under Eduardo, and we were Nova Garacea at the time. Then a friend from like his gym in Brazil moved over. Bruno Ferreira, who's was a secondary black belt at the time, I think, but he moved over to Norwich, and me and my brother ended up setting him up at the judo club where we used to always teach like our Japanese jiu-jitsu and stuff there. We got very fortunate. Basically, we were basically like, you know, we'll cover the rent, which we managed to get. It was like £100 a month that we could pay to use the gym whenever the judo club won, and so we were like, you just teach there, and he let us train with him free while he tried to build up his class. So that was the first change, but I was still kind of under the same coach. So he stayed for a little while, but then obviously eventually he couldn't build up enough to stay living there. So I think after a year, when his lease was up on the house he was renting, he's like, oh guys, I've got to move to London. So he ended up teaching at Fight Zone in London. At first we tried to go up to visit a bit, my brother more so than I, but I went up a bit as well. So we'd go up there to train with him. But then a Spanish black belt called Baruch Martin moved into the area as well. And I remember he was, well, he still is, he's a character. He's like he's shorter than me, which is rare. He used to compete at light feather, he's like a miniature action man, like muscles on muscles, full of energy, super high pace. So yeah, he came in when I was a blue belt. And I started getting one-to-ones with him at first, and then helped him build up a bit of a club, and my brother helped as well. And eventually we got our purple belts under him. Yeah, he's the one that got us competing into IBJJF as well, because before that we were doing like, you know, the English Open and British and stuff, but not IBJJF comps. And he got us into competing in the IBJJF comps. And he kind of had that, like there were 3 a year at Crystal Palace, and you had to do those. So I did a few of those, got my purple, and it was after being purple, I think a year, that I ended up moving because of my wife's work. I moved to Brighton, and that's when I started training under Yusuf as a purple belt. I think 2-stripe purple. Yeah, I think 2-stripe purple at the time.
So you went through brown and black with Yusuf.
Yes, so, yeah.
And how's training under Yusuf? Yusuf, I mean, I've obviously known Yusuf for a number of years. Absolutely brilliant guy, great person to talk to. I mean, even if you want to talk about Jiu-Jitsu or anything at all, and you speak to Yusuf, he's always there on hand. Great competitor himself. I mean, always willing to put himself out there and fight anybody at all. Despite, I mean, he fought, I remember he fought Gary Christie, and Gary Christie is massive. In regards to Yusuf, he's massive. And he fought, and I always remember standing next to Majid Gilani, and Majid was saying, Stuart, Yusuf's going to get absolutely destroyed here. Do you know what I mean? And then Yusuf went out and he beat Gary. And he came off, and Yusuf had heard Maj saying this and came off and said, what was that, Maj? So yeah, I mean, absolutely fantastic guy, fantastic competitor. So, I mean, how was it in the beginning training with Yusuf?
Yeah, it was great. I mean, I think when I first came over, I was still very much into my MMA at the time, and I think I had my first fight on the Russian promotion ACB. They were having their first show in Glasgow, actually. Yeah. So I was scheduled to fight on that when I first started training at Elements, and I think Yusuf was he was in Japan at the time when I started training there. So it was like Tony Hambos that was running classes in his absence as one of his brown belts. So I was training a bit there. And then after my fight, I won my fight. I came back, and then I met Yusuf for the first time. And it was great training with him. One of the things that really stood out was what a level of competitor he was as well. I mean, I've been fairly fortunate in nearly all the coaches that I've received belts under have been active competitors, and I think it was important to me as I was a competitor. I don't think it's necessarily important to everyone, but for me, it was very important that my coach kind of put himself out there, because that made me want to put out there. And also, in a sense, like some of the biggest fears and hesitations that people get about competing is generally about how you appear to others. Like if you know you're going to have a competition and it's going to be in a locked room and no one will ever know what happens unless you choose to tell them, most people will be like, yeah, I'll do that. But it's everything else. It's the fact that, you know, being humiliated, that kind of thing. I think the fact that having a coach that puts themselves out there rather than just making you put yourself out there, I think that's a massive thing. And obviously, from the point of view that he's constantly trying to be as good as he can be, and he's trying to learn new things all the time. That was a big help to me as well. So, but yeah, he really started getting me into competing in jiu-jitsu seriously, because before I generally only was competing in jiu-jitsu, especially as a purple belt. I was really only competing in jiu-jitsu when my coach was like insisting, like the IBJJF national or something. I wasn't really doing it. Apart from that, I was focusing on my MMA. So he really started getting me into like, oh, well, you know, you're a decent grappler. Like, you should compete in jiu-jitsu more. So I started doing that a lot more between my MMA fights, and also just the things that I was getting away in like the smaller gyms that I was been training at with, where like apart from like my coach Baruch, me and my brother were generally the highest ranks in the room. We could kind of get away with a lot of things. And to an extent, because my coach was actually like 10 kilos lighter than me, I could get away with some things with him just because of physical difference. And then Yusuf, who was about my own weight at the time and stuff, it's like, well, no, you can't. Yeah, it was a big like eye opener for me on sort of the levels really. And also just the ability I was able to train. Like he had 3 jiu-jitsu classes a day. It was, you know, I mean, as a purple belt, I joke now that I could not keep up the routine I was doing as a purple belt, because I literally I would train 3 jiu-jitsu classes during the week every day, as well as a Thai session at Ken and Shiro. It was like, yeah, I like that would kill me these days. Like now I could only do that at that age, I think. Yeah, so it was, yeah.
Definitely. Nah, I'd say Yusuf, absolutely brilliant. As I said, even when I was talking to him the other day, and or the last a couple of weeks ago, sorry, and just obviously talking to him. I love talking to Yusuf about jiu-jitsu because as he's very, very knowledgeable. As I say, he's been around for a number of years as well. So, and he's always on hand. Even though I don't train with Yusuf, he's always on hand. If you ever need advice or anything like that, you can always phone him or drop a message, and he'll always come back to you.
Yeah, no, totally. No, I mean, that's one of the biggest things I also noticed about like because it was kind of my first experience of training at a big gym regularly, but just like a lot of the people there, there were a lot of guys like me that had been graded under other people and trained at other gyms and then ended up moving there. And a lot of the reasons they were like, yeah, it was always like, you know, I'd go to this comp and my coach, like there weren't enough of us going, so he hadn't bothered coming, and Yusuf would just end up cornering me, and I got to know him that way. There's so many stories like that about just how he'd basically gone out of his way to help people when he didn't really need to. And I mean, it's like it's a very rare thing for people to not really have bad things to say about people in the martial art community, but generally speaking, there's a few like Marco Kanya and Yusuf, like 2 I've noticed that very few people will have a problem with them, and generally if people have a problem with them, it's normally says more about that person than it does them.
Yeah, definitely.
Definitely.
Definitely one of the nice guys, and he's got the best hair in jiu-jitsu as well. So his hair, even when he goes on to a competition, and he'll roll about. I remember he fought Gary Christie, and he came off, and his hair was all over the place, and it was just one shake of the hand, and it was all back to normal again. So definitely the best hair in jiu-jitsu. So
definitely.
And then catch wrestling. So was that something that you'd always done, or was that something you were always interested in?
I'd always been interested in like pretty much my idol for fighting was Sakuraba always. And prior to doing jiu-jitsu, like Brazilian jiu-jitsu, but I was mostly a grappler. I kind of was looking, it's weird, I was kind of looking for an identity always to try and like latch on little bits, like, oh, maybe I'm a Sambo guy, maybe I'm a, you know, blah, blah, whatever. And yeah, with catch wrestling, it was like I naturally started developing a real love for the Kimura. And I think it was, I think William Abreu, a black belt on the Cyborg in the States, he came over and did a seminar, and he was the first guy who showed me to start setting up, I think it was arm bars with the Kimura trap, and I started getting them in comp. So I started getting obsessed with that. And then people basically used to start saying that, oh, you kind of fight a bit like a catch wrestler. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. But yeah, so I got very into like left field grapplers, kind of like not from the mainstream sort of, you know, like luta livre guys I really liked, and a lot of things like that, which basically Brazilian catch wrestling. But so I got sort of a lot into that. And then I remember the catch wrestling tournament at the Snake Pit was advertising, like I think a couple of guys I knew had mentioned it or something, so I sort of looked into it, and I was like, oh man, should enter that. And I was a good friend of mine and a training partner, and one of my coaches, John Hathaway, he again also he's like got loads of sort of grappling from this there unorthodox techniques and things, and so he was like, yeah, we should definitely do that. At first it was said like just like passing comment, and then we actually did it. So yeah, that was like an epic trip going up there, and obviously Josh Barnett was there fighting he'd flown over for it, and actually in my division, my final fight of the day was actually against one of his black belts. So like John wins his division, kind of smashes through everyone. I win my first 2 matches, and then I've got Josh Barnett's guy at the end, and I'm like, oh man, he's like a black belt, he's a pro MMA fighter, oh shit. And and then I end up submitting him with a Kimura or double wrist lock in 55 seconds, I think it was. Nice. And it was crazy. It was like he had Josh Barnett in his corner and stuff. It was like really surreal. And that was the first black belt I'd submitted in a competition as well as a brown belt at the time.
Yeah.
That was like awesome. And that kind of then cemented the fact, like, oh yeah, people used to refer to me as a catch wrestler after that a lot. Always before, when people like, oh, you have quite a catch wrestling style. Like I remember Lee, is it Livingstone from CSA? I think it's Lee Livingstone. Yeah, he came up to me at the Brighton Open once. He's like, man, you have a real catch wrestling style. Has anyone told you that? This was like when I was a purple belt. So I used to get it like here and there, but then after the Worlds, the Snake Pit Worlds, that was like then that was me stamped. But yeah.
So I mean, you've done a lot. I mean, obviously looking at it, obviously you mentioned Aikido, Japanese Jiu-Jitsu, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. You mentioned obviously doing some Sambo, martial arts, catch wrestling, Krav Maga. So obviously with all of that, then, so what's your favorite?
My favorite, definitely. I'm going to say grappling rather than jiu-jitsu, because I think I enjoy, like, I think I view it more as a complete style rather than a particular approach. I think jiu-jitsu generally has the most open approach to grappling, but especially since, like, I mean, now it's getting a little bit more things, but probably thanks to John Hathaway again. I like a lot of the mean, like slightly nasty stuff, knees on the face and things, and obviously heel hooks and cranks and stuff, which strictly a lot of jiu-jitsu kind of frowned out. And now IBJJF is letting in some, isn't it? It's I'm not sure if they're letting in cranks, but they're letting in heel hooks and reaping.
Yeah, for the heel hooks, So
but in a sense, I kind of think grappling is it's a general style, and then you've got the various rule sets, and often like jiu-jitsu has been a particular rule set. But so definitely grappling, hands down. I mean, I started noticing it towards the end of my MMA career. If I didn't have an MMA fight, I'd quite easily not do striking. I'd quite easily skip the boxing session, skip the Muay Thai session. I'd never skip the jiu-jitsu session or the grappling session. That I was doing, whether I had a grappling competition, MMA, it didn't matter. I was because I just enjoyed it so much.
Yeah, I mean, you're probably right. I mean, grappling would encompass everything. So obviously you would have jiu-jitsu, sambo, catch wrestling. It would encompass everything. So grappling is a general thing. What's your favorite rule set? So IBJJF or Naga, ADCCs?
I really like the Naga ones, actually. I've really enjoyed the Naga comps I've done. I think 6 minutes is a very good time set for like the intensity. It keeps a high intensity. I like the way they reward submission attempts as well with points instead of advantages. And also, I think just the fact it's very allowing. Like you can wear whatever you want. Like you can even, like, people can enter at different like experience levels, which again, it's great. It's almost sometimes reminds me of like the early UFCs, and the fact that you can fight a straight wrestler, you can fight a pure wrestler in the elite division. And I think I really like the Naga setup.
Definitely. And then they've got Daniel Wong, Dom Dillon, the Kimura villain. Daniel Wong. And then in regards to everything you've done, what's been competition-wise, so obviously the Jiu-Jitsu competitions you've done, obviously MMA, obviously becoming #1 in 2 different weight divisions, the catch wrestling world championships. What's been your favourite moment?
Favorite moment? To be honest, it's. I mean, I guess it's always, you have a short memory as a competitor, so it's always the most recent thing in a sense. But for me, I feel the biggest point with me was actually my loss to Ross Nichols on Polaris earlier this year. Like, for me, the biggest thing was him saying afterwards that he was lucky to get past me. Like, being able to put on a performance like that against someone like him, I think for me that was one of my biggest achievements, because it's yeah. Personally, at least, maybe it's not a great plaque to fit on the wall. Lost to my Ross by a small margin, but yeah, for me personally, that's something I'd consider.
Definitely. And what's your future plans then? So what can we expect from you coming up in the future? Obviously, once we get back to proper competing and things like that, I mean, what do you see yourself doing, or what's your goals going forward?
Also, I mean, I'd love to be able to compete on Polaris more and maybe work my way up to a title shot at a division. I'd love to be able to do that. But yeah, just I mean, I really enjoyed the squads format. I didn't feel I performed my best at the last squads, so I'd very much like another opportunity to be a part of that. To be honest, yeah, to be able to compete in as many kind of sort of high profile competitions as possible to make up for this year. Really, I'd really like to go out to the Nogi Worlds next year, especially now that they're allowing heel hooks and reaping. I'd really enjoy that. So yeah, that's like a big one on my list. ADCC trials are also another one that I'd really like to tick off.
Definitely. So obviously some goals coming up. Again, I'd say I first got to see you at SGI, so hopefully we can get you up for an SGI again. Obviously yourself and Yusuf and things like that. Definitely get you up for one of them again. Once we get all this lockdown stuff and coronavirus out the way, hopefully, if everybody's talking about the vaccine, if everybody gets the vaccine and it works, then brilliant. We'll be training as soon as possible. So
it'll be life back to normal. 2020.
Definitely. And then last thing for you, I mean, anybody you want to thank, so any sponsors, or I mean, it's been a long journey for you, so I'm pretty sure the list will be extensive. But yeah, anybody you kind of want to single out.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I've had a lot of help over the years, like all the people that have coached me, and yeah, as you say, a lot of different sponsors over the years. One South have been a great help recently, and obviously, coach-wise, like Yusuf has been an amazing coach and helped me, like, really, I'd say, realize my potential as a grappler. And obviously John Hathaway as well, who again has been a great coach and training partner for me. Yeah, and of course my wife and kids as well, who sort of balance out and keep me sane most of the time.
Definitely.
Yeah, and just all the people I get to enjoy this wonderful sport with, really.
Definitely. Well, it's one thing I'd say once we get all sorted and we're back to normal, I did say to Yusuf, I used to enjoy going and traveling around different gyms and just kind of seeing different styles, rolling and meeting different people and things like that. So Brighton's obviously one place I've not been down to yet. So I said to Yusuf, once we get this sorted out, I'll definitely be down. Come and visit you guys and definitely get some training in with you guys.
Yeah, that'd be great. We'll have to do a follow up. I don't think I answered Kev's question in the end, did I?
Well, that was we said that before the show, before it went live. So Kevin McAloon, obviously you had the epic fight with Kevin McAloon recently, and one of the things Kevin said is ask Dom. Let me get the question, because the question it's a typical Kevin McAloon question. So let's have a look. So Kevin McAloon asked Dom how it felt that he couldn't finish his Kimura on me.
Oh, it was horrific. I've been back and watched that multiple times, and I've worked out several scenarios in how I should have changed chasing it on there. But it was a very, very nice defense on his part. But yeah, I've been back and watched it multiple times, and I've come up with 2 options that I should have done instead of continuing in the path. But,
so listen, you'll get him the next time.
Yeah, well, there's the reason he hasn't been submitted in so long, you know.
Yeah, nah, Kev. I mean, as I said, when I watched it, I mean, we were not just me, but we're obviously talking in group chats and things like that, thinking it's going to be over very, very soon. And it seemed to keep going, and you're thinking. And obviously, say you had it on, and Kev obviously defending it did very, very well.
Yeah.
So,
very well. That was very nice. It was very nice defense.
Nice.
Yeah.
So there you go, Kev. I hope that answers it for you, Kevin. So, but definitely, if that, I'm sure if it happens again, as I say, Dom's got a couple of ways he's going to definitely get you the next time, Kevin. So, but Dom, listen, it's been an absolute honour to have you on, sir. I said I was excited about having you on. I said I know a lot about you, so just excited about obviously hearing a little bit more about the man himself, and obviously excited about everybody else being able to hear about you as well. So, listen, it's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you.
No, thank you.
Not a problem. Listening, we'll speak to you soon, Dom. Okay.
All right.